I'm so excited to have our guest this week. She is a stand-up comedian whose first HBO special is dropping this Friday called The Intruder. She's been killing it for a long time now, but she's like blowing up. My internet friend, I'm so happy to have on the Nerds of Color. Please welcome Atsuko Okatsuka.
Thanks, Keith. Thanks so much for having me. Hi. It's coming out Saturday, actually.
Saturday's the 10th. I thought time is irrelevant at this point. It's coming out December 10th is what's important.
Yeah, no worries. No worries. Yeah. It's time.
What is
Uh,
time?
I always have my calendar on me just to be like, okay, when we were in school, we would write the date every day.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and that helped. That was really helpful. That always made me ground myself. I always knew what day it was, at least.
I didn't even know what today is, to be honest. So let's take that from the top. December 10th, which is a Saturday, Atsuko's first HBO special drops. There we go. Now we got it all clear.
Yay.
And then the thing is, like, it's gonna stream. So, like, again, there's no sense of time anymore. It used to be back in the day, you had to like sit and wait for a specific time for your show to come on. But like once it drops, people can stream it on HBO Max. But anyway, Atsuko, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Just sort of in a frenzy because I feel like I shot my special just like 2 months ago,
Mhm.
and it's been go 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 ever since. And the turnaround's been so quick for it to come out 2 months later.
Yeah, and that's being premiere week. I'm sure it must be just like crazy thing after crazy thing.
Yeah, but I'm so excited. I'm so excited to share this with the world, and it's nice instead of like sitting on a thing that you've been working on and then just like it won't come out till 8 months from now kind of
Mhm.
thing, like the excitement's still there for me. All of it's still fresh for me. The material, and so I think it's good. It's
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Well, and the thing is, like, this is not your first special, and like I said, you've been doing the comedy game for over a decade, I think, right? If not
Mm,
more.
yeah, 13 years ago is when I started. And yeah, I even took a tiny break in between because there's always self-doubt and you think, okay, I don't know. I don't know if I was scared to even call myself a comedian for the longest
Mhm.
time. And I would like enroll myself in school or, try to pick up another thing to maybe sort of dance around. I kept dancing around the embracing that I am a comedian. And so all of that took, 13 years.
Yeah.
And yeah, yeah. But this
Well,
is the one
that's
I
the
feel most
thing.
proud of.
But that, well, I was going to get to that because, like, to be a comedian, it's one thing to have a special. It's another thing to have an HBO special, right? Like, I know that we're in the world of like everyone's got specials. You put it up on YouTube. There's Netflix, but like for folks, of I think our generation who kind of grew up on stand-up comedy, like the HBO special was its own kind of thing, right? Like you think of like Robin Williams or George Carlin or Margaret Cho, for example. You're the first Asian comedian since Margaret Cho, I think, to have an HBO special. So,
Yeah.
what was that like? One, when you like realized that The Intruder was going to be your HBO special, and did you put any kind of import on the idea that this wasn't just like any old special, that this was going on like what used to be like the premier name in stand-up comedy?
Yeah, for sure. There was it's like a circle back to, the OG, you know what I mean? HBO stand-up specials were the OG, and it's I feel so happy because I feel like this work, the way I even do comedy now, tell jokes now, and the way I write jokes now and perform it is finally authentically me. And I'm so stoked that that is that found a home at HBO. And I think it deserves it. I did 26 days in a row in Scotland at Edinburgh to Scottish farmers with no AC in a bunker, having two mental breakdowns and my husband having to be my support system. And, as part of the process for putting together the Intruder. And so, yeah, it feels good. I think it really deserved to have a nice home like this.
Yeah. One again, like I see you as a friend. Like we've known each other for a couple years, and just to see you kind of like you said, you've been doing it for a while, but feels like in the last year you've really blown up. I think it was almost exactly a year ago you had your national TV debut on the
Hmm.
James Corden show, and like I feel like from that moment to this moment was, you were kind of like steadily going up the hill, and then boom, you like shoot off like a rocket. Is that how it feels? Does it feel like this last year has been like on a different level from where you were like even 2 or 3 years ago when you were doing sets in the middle of earthquakes or whatever?
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. And I had to take the time to look back and realize that, just the other day, just because after a special, you start thinking about, gosh, what did it take to get here? Especially doing press and interviews and stuff like that. And I had a realization where it was like, yeah, it was a year ago. I did my first ever late night set. And it was like a year ago that I started touring with my new hour of jokes. For 6 months, I toured with this hour of jokes that wasn't the Intruder. And then the last, and then I tweaked it to turn it into the Intruder. And then for the rest of the 6 months, I toured it as that. And so it's like I toured this hour. I toured for a year exactly. And then I get to, I got to tape it as a special afterwards. Um, and so, yeah, it's been like a whirlwind of a year going to city after city after city. And it was my first ever solo tour too. But because I had been prepping for 13 years, because I had been doing stand-up shows all over town, during the pandemic, I did all the Zoom shows. I really hunkered down and looked inside and started writing jokes that were difficult for me to talk about in the past, like about my mom's schizophrenia,
Right.
my actual fears. Doing Zoom shows also helped me, I think, uh, become a better performer too, because it's the only time you're looking at yourself as you perform. You never do that in stand-up
Right.
comedy. And so you realize, oh, the little ticks that you do, or the little like facial expressions that you make, when your eyes widen like this during a joke, it hits it harder. Things like that I still um use on stage today, things I learned from Zoom. And, I also went on social media more and talked to my fans there directly. And um, all of that, sort of, I think, helped me figure out me as a performer really faster than, all the years put together. But the foundation of doing stand-up for so long also culminated in this moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, and I also think that, like, to your point about like finding your voice and the style of comedy that you did, when you and Jenny were out doing the Disoriented tour, like however many years ago, versus the kind of, I mean, I think the like you said, the polished hour that the Intruder is, right? Like, there's definitely a growth in terms of your not just your joke telling, but just your like comedy persona, right? Has evolved over the last 5, 6, 7 years. And but I'm interesting that you mentioned the pandemic, because I feel like it was around that time too that you took to social media a little bit more. You were posting more videos. I think you joined TikTok
Mm-hmm.
around the time of the pandemic, right? And like that was like a whole other kind of like branch to your comedy persona that really evolved from where you were before. Do you feel that that is the case too? Like, I think your grandma becoming part of like your again your comedy persona, like she's a star herself now, right? Like she's got her own following, which must be
Mm-hmm.
really weird to you that like your grandma has like a social media following. But what I mean, do you think that that's also like the pandemic had a lot to do with you just kind of discovering your voice and adding elements to your comedy persona?
For sure, 100%, and I shied away from it before. I didn't know how to approach it before because um I don't know, you could be anybody. You could be anybody when you're performing, you could be anybody online. And again, it's the dancing around of like I won't show my full self, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Maybe I do like maybe I do characters, maybe I do sketches on Instagram, you know, because other people do. You're just reaching because you're, you know, I love all kinds of art and performance. And so I watch all those things. I watch, you know, some comedians are character comedians, and that's
Mhm.
what they do on Instagram, for example, or sketch comedians, and they make sketches. But, you know, during the pandemic, I was just being me, talking to camera, for example, with my thoughts, and then it would have a comedic take on it. And that's really how I talk, you know. Maybe
Mhm.
I'm not a character person, maybe I'm not a sketch person. And that's refreshing for me because I can just be me. I am a stand-up comedian. I am a performer where I connect to people just by being me. And so so yeah, that was cool to realize.
Yeah. I mean, because some of the best comedy are, like get at a particular truth, right? Or like explore a certain aspect of yourself. Because as you said, like there are comedians who just kind of like they're one way on stage, and then you talk to them off stage, and it's like, oh, you're completely different than I thought you were. And of course, there's always like a heightened sense of who you are
Yes,
on
yeah.
stage. But you're talking about real things. You're not like necessarily like I'm assuming this person really did like, you know you had this home invasion, actually had this home invasion experience. It's not like you're making it up, like this thing happened to you. But then that
Mhm.
the fact that you can take this real world event and build like your kind of like storytelling around that, that's what make that, it's that honesty, it's that like real world experience, I think, that just adds another layer to the comedy.
Yeah, and I'm such an open book that like, and I do like dancing, and so I put that on social media, you know. It's like the sort of what you were saying with the multifaceted layers of being a person. And so I just you know, yeah, I just, if the dancing is what brought you to my page, great, you know. That's still a part of me. You know what I mean?
So I mean, I mentioned earlier that the HBO special has a kind of like a special place in comedy history, and Margaret being one of the legendary comics that to have an HBO special. And I think you posted a social media video recently about her influence and what it's like to kind of like follow in her footsteps. Who were some other stand-up comics that when before you even got into the industry that you kind of, I wouldn't say modeled your act after, but that you actually, you looked up to, or you thought like this is the kind of comedy that I want to do, or this is what inspired me to do comedy?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't like a comedy nerd per se growing up, and I
I'm feeling a
love.
little called out, but okay.
No, and I'm a comedy nerd.
No,
I
I'm
am a
just
comedy nerd now. I
right, right.
love the craft. I'm obsessed with how jokes are written. I'm obsessed with each persona. I'm obsessed when something could use a tag. You know, I love stand-up comedy so much. But, you know, as a kid, it's like if you weren't exposed to it, if you didn't have family members that sort of were also into it too,
Mhm.
or if you weren't secure enough, you might not have found stand-up comedy because you were just reaching for all kinds of things, you know, you're just trying to fit in. So I didn't, I wasn't super exposed to that. So it's not like, it was really when I got into stand-up that I started watching more, you know. But Margaret Cho I was exposed to before I got into stand-up comedy. And then I also watched Robin Williams as well. I saw him do stand-up. Um, and yeah, those two were very memorable for me. Very
Mhm.
different performers, different styles. And then once I did start getting into stand-up comedy myself, Tig Notaro was a huge influence for me.
And
Yeah,
Tig directed the special, right?
she did. Yeah, she did.
How did that come about? Because like again, Tig is one of the best to do it right now, and currently is one of the best doing it. How did you get Tig to be the one to direct The Intruder?
Well, we're friends, and she's my idol, and we get along really well, and we have so much fun together. It's silly times. Her comedy is silly first, and so
Right.
am I. Right? We're both, no matter what we talk about, no matter if we're talking about something difficult that we're going through, or something like a subject that might not be funny historically, it's always silly first,
Mhm.
just like a nudge at the audience or just comedy first. And I love that about her. And it's like that when we hang out too. And I thought for my first ever HBO stand-up special, it would be cool to have a fellow stand-up comedian, A, but also B, why not have it be my favorite comedian, you know? And so that's how that came about. And she, she's a busy person. She's in Star Trek, she's on the morning show, she's got her own stand-up to do, she's got kids, hot commodity. And so directing isn't even like, I don't want to, I didn't want to put her just in that role,
Mhm.
but she said yes. So that's how that came about.
No, that's awesome. And one of the things that I think that is really fascinating too is that, like you said, like you always look for the humor first, no matter how difficult the topic might be. And this is it seems to be a topic that comes up a lot when talking about stand-up comedy. And there's definitely like a subset of comedians who feel like, I can't say anything, like people are too woke and there's no freedom of speech. And like now they all run Twitter, apparently. But like and especially like, our mutual friend Jenny Yang, she's very political and she's very like activist oriented, but she's also like one of the funniest people I know. So it's like, what is the problem with folks who feel like I can't say anything? Like, maybe to your point, if maybe you're not funny, is the problem, and like just like being mean to people is not actually humor. Do you know what I'm saying? Like that kind of divide, I think that's currently, a hot topic in the comedy world.
Yeah, I think, when I say funny first, I think with comedy, to do comedy, and this is why I got into comedy, I think, and my favorite comedians also got into it, I think this way. It comes down to be a comedian, you have to like people. You really do. You
Yeah.
really do. No matter what your persona is on stage, even if it's faux angry, even if it's like faux, what the hell is this? Being
Right.
confused about things and sort of, again, angry about it. You have to love people. And that's why you do it. You're trying to actually, with your jokes, like, culminate and also feel seen, oh my
Hmm.
gosh, yeah, I also felt that way too. Yeah, I thought I was the only one. I'm so glad you
Right.
think it too. Or like, I never thought about it that way. Oh my gosh, I'm also like a weirdo like you. And so, it's a service job. Stand-up comedy is a service industry. I believe 100% in that. I don't think you should ever use stand-up comedy as therapy.
Hmm.
And we've seen comedians do that, right? Where it's like, as the audience, you're like, oh no, what's going on?
Is he okay?
They're crumbling. Oh my God. There's darkness, and you know what I mean? And I never treat it as therapy. I've always have practiced it a bunch, even if it's just at my house for plants, because even when I have a workshop show before I take out my new hour, I have rehearsed it a bunch of times at home before I even bring it to people, because that's my job. And so I think, that's what it comes down to for me, uh, funny or not, angry or not, whether you can say things or not. Maybe you just need to reprioritize why you got into comedy in the first place. That's
Hmm.
all,
Hmm.
you know?
So
Yeah.
with the intruder, you do have this. It's kind of built around this experience I alluded to earlier, where someone actually showed up at your house in the smack dab in the middle of the pandemic. I know it's played for laughs, and it's a very can be a very harrowing experience, but like just stepping back, like what went through your mind when having had this experience that made you say, "Oh my God, this is so scary. I should add this in my special."
Yeah, I mean, enough time had passed actually from it. And I got to really think about it. And I was telling people about it over and over after it happened, because, as just a warning sign, but also to be like, this wild thing happened to us in the same day. And, as I told it, people were laughing through it. And I was like, no, it's a real thing that happened. It's not funny, and I was like, well, maybe it is funny because now it's over and we're okay.
Hmm.
And so I started figuring out how to put it in my hour of jokes that I was already touring with. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when I also started touring with Mike Birbiglia, who's
Mm-hmm.
also a great friend and an amazing comedian. And he's a master at also figuring out story.
Right.
He's got a show on Broadway right now called The Old Man and the Pool. And it's not his first time on Broadway. You know, he knows this stuff. And so I was telling him, gosh, I have this story about this intruder who came to our house 3 times in the same day. And I don't know how to put it. I don't know how to fit it into the hour
Mm-hmm.
of jokes that I already have. And he goes, that's 3 acts. And I was like, oh
Mm-hmm.
my God, I didn't even think about that. And so then I started challenging myself to sort of add, use that as the backbone for my new hour, and then
Yeah.
calling it the intruder.
And I also love that and I'm sure this is intentional because you are a great writer as well, but the intruder also has, especially not knowing that that's the main kind of thrust. When I first saw that the name of the special was the intruder, I was thinking, oh, it's got an entendre of like because you're kind of like quote unquote new on the scene, you're a different kind of comedian, you're kind of like disrupting comedy, like all these and especially like your immigrant status, your undocumented status. It's a whole lot of like entendres to the phrase intruder, and I'm sure that's part of the reason why you wanted to call the special that.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. And then the literal intruder
And then
too.
right, to me
Yeah.
that was the surprise, like, oh, this, you actually had an intruder in your home. That's
I
crazy.
love that. I love that the literal intruder is the surprise. You know what I mean? Instead of, it's like, well, oh, wow, there's literally that in the special, because yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. That it's not the possible poetic
Yeah,
metaphors
yeah,
that maybe,
yeah.
that, right? Because that's what maybe, I mean,
That's
I try to be more like, ooh, metaphoric and poetic. Oh, that's cool. That's
yeah,
cool,
yeah.
but
Like, no, it's a guy came to my house 3 times. That's
I'm
actually
kind
what
of a say it as it is kind of person. But also, if the poetic stuff is in there too, that's awesome.
well, and because you talk about your undocumented status and your immigrant status and your family kind of history, and one of the things that and I think you talked about this on a podcast recently too, like you don't come from a stereotypical Asian family, right? Like, there's
Hmm.
no tiger parenting happening.
Right.
There's no, like, the fact that you kind of like, none of your jokes is I'm a comedian and my parents hate that they wanted me to be a doctor, right? Like, there's none of that in your comedy, and which I find refreshing, because so much, not just Asian comedy, a lot of Asian stories kind of like fall to like generational
Hmm.
trauma and like all that kind of stuff. But you have a different kind of generational trauma in your
Right.
family history that doesn't fit neatly into like the typical Asian American immigrant story. Do you have a hard time? Because I talk about this all the time as a Asian, I have another podcast where I talk about growing up in the South as an Asian American, and which is a lot different from a lot of like our mutual friends are all like from the Bay Area or from LA or
Hmm.
from New York City, and they have a different, like, they all grew up around other Asian people and had all these expectations thrust upon them to be like successful businessmen or lawyers or doctors. Can you talk a little bit about, like, one, kind of being an undocumented immigrant, and like just the kind of like really wild family history that you bring to who you are today, and bring to your comedy as well?
Yeah, I think, well, we're 3 generations of immigrant women who were living in a garage, undocumented, because of a lie my grandma told me about how long we were going to be here in the States. And my mom has schizophrenia. And so, immediately it's a little bit like, what is this Lifetime movie or Hallmark? Or no, this isn't Hallmark. It's more Lifetime.
Yeah, yeah.
Hallmark don't
Home,
get edgy like that.
right, right. And it's not around Christmas. Like, it's only like if it's about Christmas that it's like a Hallmark movie.
That's true. Then it's not even, it's not Lifetime. I don't know what this is. This tragic play. What is this tragic play we're watching? Right. And just 3 people desperately trying to run from trauma. That's really what me and my grandma's dance videos are. I love that people love them so much and they go viral and people recreate it all over the world, but it's really just us running from trauma.
Right. That's how you deal. It's your therapy.
Just like hurry, maybe if just hurry, like if you shake her butt fast enough, maybe we can shake off that one divorce or schizophrenia. And so that's really what's going on. And then
Yeah.
us having fun through it. And all of that, because that is so like already it's unconventional. It's not a
Hmm.
movie you've ever seen before, but it's also a comedy in that, we really hit the gray areas, the nuances, I feel like, of conversations where it's like, what is this? Okay, so they're undocumented from where? Tokyo? Another story we've never
Right.
heard before. You know what I mean? Like, who moves from Tokyo to live in a garage in Los Angeles with no papers and no rights? You know what I mean? Who does
Right.
that?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Hi, hello. It's the Okatsuka Lees. We do that. You know what I mean? And
and then like your family, your parentage is crazy too, because your parents met on like a dating show, right? Or like a
yes.
kind of like a dating show. Was it like a
Yeah, it was like a
television program?
filmed, yeah, it was like a filmed like
Game show?
dating experiment that my grandma had signed my mom up for. She saw it in the papers, in the trades in Taiwan, and then flew with my mom to go to Japan to to hopefully find her a Japanese husband, because my mom was in her 30s and single still. And so everyone was like, what's wrong with her?
Right.
In the 80s. And so, yeah, all of it. Like, it's like all like we just, all of us grew up unconventionally. My grandma's husband had passed away. He was murdered when she was 28, raised 3 kids on her own, and then had to
Wow.
raise me, and it's like, why would any of that then then suddenly look like the traditional Asian family that wants me to be a doctor? That
Right.
conversation, we didn't have time for that conversation. We were making sure my mom wasn't going to get her next seizure. We were going to make
Yeah.
sure that we were learning English quickly enough. And my grandma was trying to help me with my homework because, the language barrier had finally struck hard enough where she couldn't help me with at least my English homework. And, we were having to figure out so much. And at the same
While you're living
time,
in a garage.
yeah, and then I got an eating disorder, in middle school and high school. We didn't have time to be like, okay, well, you gotta be the most exceptional engineer. You know what I mean? Nobody cared. It's like, I'm so happy you're just alive.
Yeah.
Okay, Atsuko,
Yeah.
that's all we care about. Thank you. It's like we didn't have time to dream. We didn't know we could, and
Yeah.
so so that's why it's like these kinds of weirdos, it's kind of the Intruder is an anthem for me, for other fellow beautiful weirdos out there too that are.
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, what I love about it is and what I love about your story is that it is such a unique, but it's also like another example of what it means to be Asian in America, right? And like that's something that as people who purvey in like Asian American stories and Asian American representation, sometimes I think like, okay, like there's a very specific kind of Asian American that's almost overrepresented now. We want to like shine the spotlight on different types of Asian American stories. Again, that kind of is the premise of my other podcast, but like that's something that I think the Intruder does. Is it's like, here's another way to be Asian in America, and
Mhm.
that's what I really like love about the work that you do, Atsuko. So
Thank you.
there's an expectation when you hear like, oh, here's an Asian comedian, and what are they going to talk about? And it's always like the same types of things, and it's like, you actually have a different angle that you bring to it, and it's not about like culture clash or language or again, generational, like my expectations and stuff like that. So that's what I really appreciate.
Thank you. I thank my family for that.
Thank you for being dysfunctional family.
Yeah. It's because they made me talk about other things.
Thank God your family's so dysfunctional is what I'm saying at the end of the day.
Oh, for real. Yeah. Sometimes I want to just look at my family in the eyes and be like, look, if you wanted me to be a comedian, okay, you should have just told me. Okay, this is a real roundabout way. I know this is what you want it to be, right? Like you
Yeah.
were setting it up. At least for it's not for everyone, right? Not for every comedian, but for this one, it was a perfect journey, honestly.
Right. The perfect concoction.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well, you know, like I said, The Intruder comes out on Saturday, December 10th, and will be streamed on HBO Max for eternity after that.
Yeah, HBO and HBO Max, whichever one you have a password to, right?
Right. Exactly. Other than HBO, how can people find you on the internet? Because I mean, and anyone who's listening to this or watching this is probably already following you, but just in the off chance that they're not, where can they find you on the internet?
I'm at Atsuko Comedy on all the socials except for TikTok. On there, I'm Let's Go Atsuko because I couldn't remember my password for Atsuko Comedy on TikTok. So Let's Go Atsuko on TikTok, Atsuko Comedy everywhere else.
So is there an Atsuko Comedy TikTok account that's just like floating in limbo somewhere?
Yeah, that I opened up and I just cannot, for the life of me, cannot sign in.
So if anyone at TikTok is listening, I think Atsuko just needs access to her other account.
I need help. Like, answer my emails.
Just put it out. TikTok, if you're listening.
And stop following that Atsuko Comedy account. It's inactive. I'm not on there. Not on TikTok. Not on TikTok.
Let's Go Atsuko only on TikTok.
Thank you.
All right, Atsuko, congratulations. I'm so like excited for you. I'm happy for where you are right now, and I can't wait for everyone else to watch The Intruder. It's going to be an awesome experience for them.
Thanks so much, Keith.
Professional artists and professors, maybe a nerd who's just like you, talking about the things that you like too. So I invite you to the NOC. In full color, you see me. The hard knock